My name is Erin Weideman, and you are listening to Heroes for Her. This series features candid conversations with real women who strive to balance their professional acumen with their personal values. Join me as I interview positive female role models who are working hard, loving others, and inspiring the next generation of girls to serve their unique purpose.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Heroes for Her. I am super excited that you're here. My guest today is awesome. It's Breanna Robinson. She is a young adult and a kids ministry leader at C3 Church right here in San Diego. She's also a children's book author, and her book, Begone Fear, equips kids to overcome their fears with God by their side. I love that so much. Her passion involves impacting generations by raising up the next batch of faith-filled leaders and world changers. So it's like my jam. I couldn't want to talk about that more. Bree also created The Purpose Within, which is a personal development blog and a platform for young people who have a desire to dig deep, discover, and develop their life's purpose. She's had a lot of different experiences that she shares there growing up as a pastor's kid. She's learned a lot of lessons so far in her life and journey, and she is all about conveying the importance of finding your identity, walking in your strength, and just allowing God to come alongside you so you can find and grow and develop your purpose. And I love that so much. Bree, thanks for being here, girl.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited to share, and I just know that God will hopefully use some of my story in my life to encourage others. So it's going to be awesome.
He definitely will. Would you give everybody just sort of like a lay of the land of you? So like where you grew up, you landed in San Diego, your family, just talk a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, I'm now living in San Diego. I've been here for the last 4 years, moved out kind of whole deal when I turned 18. And my parents live though in Temecula, so about an hour and a half or so away from here. And so it's mostly where I grew up, what I was doing. And I've been here, started off college, but then God kind of redirected my steps, did an internship at C3, and since then have really been just planted and plugged into what I believe that God has called me to. So a lot of that, though, at the beginning was really messy, came to San Diego, and then finally decided to really choose God for myself.
Will you talk about that a little bit? So growing up in Temecula and like, you know, and as far as like closeness with your family and like those relationships, what was the transition like to like move away from home and, you know, get plugged into a church and feel like God was tugging on your heart for different things? Like what was that transition period like?
So as far as relationship and stuff, growing up had pretty good relationship with mom and dad. Ministry actually didn't become a factor into my life until I was in the 7th grade. And my dad kind of came home one day and was like, hey guys, I feel a call in my heart to become a pastor. And I'm there sitting at the dinner table like, what does this mean? And, you know, at that time, a lot actually shifted in my world. We went from kind of going to church on a Sunday to, you know, every service at any point in time on a Sunday. And even during the week, we were, you know, locked in at church. So I didn't for a long time really even understand the concept of why we were, you know, shifting our world, and wasn't actually a fan of the whole like pastor's kid deal. So when I came to San Diego at that point in time, actually my relationship with my mom and my dad was not very healthy because I had especially in middle school and high school, I dealt with actually a lot of pains, offenses within the church, and really feeling like I had to be this certain person. So when I came out to San Diego, it really was a moment for me, I feel like, of like an escape of starting something on my own. And then not until I would say maybe like 6 months after then did really I choose to like pursue God outside of the covering of my parents. Because for a long time, especially as a pastor's kid, you're under that covering. You're under, you know, a family and a house that's full of faith. And when you move away from that, then you're faced with obviously your decisions of, do I choose this for myself?
Yeah, definitely. And so the question that I have kind of leading into that, so you do leave the covering, and you're kind of lumped into this category being a pastor's kid, and like that's a label that you're wearing that you cool. didn't necessarily choose it, right? And then you leave the house. Like at what point was there a moment or a season or like a person that came into your life that helped you encounter God and choose faith for yourself for the first time? Like what did that look like as you made the transition of like moving away and starting out on your own?
Yeah, that's a honestly really awesome question. I think as far as choosing it on my own, during my senior year of school, so as soon as I turned 18, I stopped going to youth group, every pastor's kid favorite. Whoop,
yeah,
you know.
Later.
I no longer coming out, you know. So I just stopped going, and that's really when I would honestly say a lot of the hidden derailing I was doing was becoming very public. So I was already making decisions that weren't really the best for me, but it wasn't until obviously I made, that decision to, stop going to youth groups, stop, really being planted in the house, was when things that were secretive, really, like the Bible says, what happens in the secret is eventually going to come public,
Yep.
and that's exactly what happened. So, me going out, drinking certain things. So really I would say, which, shocker, everybody, I've ran from the police. That's, I would say, though.
We have
like,
so many things in common.
Honestly, though, like, that was my moment. I was actually at a party, was, gone in all different kinds of ways, and the cops had showed up to the party. I remember running in the house and really just having this moment. The police searched the house. I was hidden, was not found. But I remember afterwards, like, having these people around me that I was hanging out with at the time that were like, this was the best ever. Like, let's do this again. And I'm there sitting, I'm sitting there just like thinking to myself, like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I know that I don't really care for this ministry thing. I know that I have, kind of some beef with God, but I have this feeling in my heart and in my spirit that I cannot shake, even when I was making the wrong choices, that there was more for my life. And since I was young in ministry, although there was experiences that I look back on now and I'm like, dang, like, that's some heavy stuff. I also had moments where I can remember so vividly where, I was encouraged, where prophetic words are given, where encouragement was given, that in that moment, kind of flashed before my eyes of what God had called me to speak, to do certain things, right? So I had this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, all these people are loving this moment, and I'm the only one sitting here being like, there's more to my life, So I actually, for that next season, I really dragged myself, actually. I had heard about C3 at the time. I was living in Temecula. So every Saturday I was at that time either actually under the influence or from the residue of being under the influence, but I knew I had to be there. From that moment, then I went to, there was like a preview of a conference, and I decided to go to that young adults conference. And there was this moment that still gives me, like, Holy Spirit still gives me chills to this day. I'm like, was just this moment where actually one of our pastors was doing this message about wanting the cross. And I will never forget there being like this moment where he's like, lay down, you're going to have to lay down your hurts, lay down your pains, lay down the things that are going on in order to pick up Jesus and pick up what he has for you. And in that moment, I felt like this continual pursuit of God really pursuing me, that came to this moment of like, oh my gosh, like, this is my moment to really choose. Like, do I choose to stick with what I've been doing, which has obviously got me nowhere but lower, or do I choose to have hope and believe that what God has for me is bigger than what I think? And in that moment was when I said yes. And since then really have been all into what God has had for my life. And then God obviously has done so many things with my family, with myself, with my life, and with what I believe my call and purpose is.
So good. And I want to talk about call and purpose too, because like there you are, you're getting plugged into a church. You have this moment where you're like, okay, Lord, it feels like you're offering me something that I do want to say yes to. Yeah. Like, at what point did you link up or connect your, heart for kids, your passion for this next generation of kids? Like, when did that come into the picture? How soon after you were like, yes, God, this makes total sense. But like practically, and the reason I asked that question, honestly, is because there are so many kids today. I spend a lot of time like traveling around talking to high school kids, middle school kids, and they're so set on this idea that your purpose is your profession. Which in your case, like, you've been called to ministry, you do work in ministry, like that's your full-time, like your full-time vocation, or the work that you're doing, whether it's writing or speaking or being a kids ministry leader, has to do with your purpose, and it's linked up, and you've chosen that. But I'm wondering, like, when did that happen for you? And what would you say to a parent or someone who's like got a kid in their line of sight and is mentoring or discipling and watching kids grow up with this idea that like, no, your purpose, your life's purpose is your job. It's the way you're going to make yourself successful. It's the way you're going to make a lot of money.
Oh, okay. So that's a whole thing to unravel. So I'm going to answer.
Yeah, and you probably have 2 hours. So awesome.
I'm like, awesome. So the first part of that, with really, I think, narrowing in what I believe that I was called and made for, which in this season has been obviously such my passion for kids. Like, oh, I love it. But that was not the case starting off. I had said yes to this God thing, but I also was just like, ugh, like, God, like, I'm saying yes to you, but I still kind of in my mind was like, forget ministry. I want nothing to do with it, but I want you. And then God's like, okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But like, that's also who I've designed you to be. So if you're going to choose me, like there's some work we're going to have to do to get you where you need to be. So I'm over here like, well, I said yes to one part. Why do I need to say yes to the other?
Yeah, I'm trying to keep you compartmentalized, Lord. You're welcome.
Yeah, just you're welcome, God. Stay in this box, not this one.
I got it. Yeah.
But yeah, so honestly, I felt a really strong like urge to do the internship. And when I did that, they ask you on your first day, like, what's your why? And I remember being there and these words came out of my mouth as like, I'm here because I'm ready for the idea of ministry to be restored and redeemed and redefined for me. Because I'd known that it was what God had for me, but I wanted nothing to do with it. And I was like, how is this going to work if I'm supposed to step into the identity, which is I'm a child of God, but also all these other things that God has for me? How will I do that if I'm like stuck in this fear or paralyzed of what I've known? Because that's really what it was. It was like I had known this idea of what I had grown up in ministry, and I believed because that's what I saw, that that's what I would be or how I would execute it. And God was like, oh my gosh, like you're going to do it different. Like it's not going to look the same. But in my mind, that was like this blockage.
It's your context, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. That's all I knew. And so that's what I'm going off of. Those are the filters that I'm seeing through. So really in that process, I started off with, youth ministry. It's because that's what I was doing last when I was in at my dad's church. Is I was serving with him in one of his like littles classrooms, and then I was doing I was as a high schooler, I was helping out in our like middle school like ministry. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll just stick with like youth because that's what I know. So 3 months in, during that time we had to like as an internship we have to serve somewhere on a Sunday, and at that time youth didn't have like a Sunday service. They only had like a weekly service. So I was serving in kids ministry. Lo and behold, I started like dreaming of visions and stuff for kids church. I'm like, man, what about this book? I started thinking about curriculum to write. And I remember having this moment one day at work, and I was just like, God, I'm in youth. Why are you giving me things for kids? Like, stop. I literally prayed. I was like, God, if you could stop this whole kids ministry thing, like I'm not my dad, because my dad was a kids pastor, right? So I'm over here like, God, I need my own call. Like I'm not my dad. I'm not passionate about this. And that was a lie, because here I am today. Like, couldn't be more stoked about what I do. But in that, I really just found, I think, just a love. Like I just kept showing up. And I think sometimes that's the key for people, is just to keep showing up. And so I kept showing up, and in showing up really started developing this passion. So I asked at that time, like, hey, I actually would love to step out of the youth internship and step into kids, which was unheard of. I think it's like, and I'm sure this is something, like to find somebody that really is committed, not only just in the generations above, but in with kids, like to be committed to developing and setting those foundations. Like it's not something that everybody really jumps on board with. And it was something that I couldn't imagine myself not being in. Like I knew that I had to be in it. So that's really how the thing for kids came. As I struggled at first though, because I was like, well, that was my dad's thing. Like, God, where's my thing? And in that though, in this whole process, especially of stepping into kids, it honestly, God was able to redefine, redeem, and restore so much. It restored the relationship that I had with my parents, because here's the truth. I attached so many things that I experienced in ministry to my parents. So there was this unhealthy connection that was happening. So I was like, well, this is happening with my parents because of church. So I don't like my parents and I don't like church. It was this whole dysfunction that was happening. But it was how I was perceiving everything. So when I came to church and I started, really going through the internship and getting discipled, getting some stuff really dug up. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's why I'm having such a hard time with my dad. Like I didn't think he could be there because at the time the church that he was at, like said he couldn't come to my games because he had to be at, like, so I was just like attaching all of these things that were super necessary. So hopefully that answers the first part of your question, as I found that really being planted and keeping showing up. Because, especially after a time of being away from God, like I think there needs to be an intentionality to be all in. And that's really what I had to do, because it can be easy to really slip into old things again. So I had to be intentional about showing up, intentional about serving, intentional about being planted, so that I could stick to the course of, one, of my relationship with God, but two, what he had called me to. Sure. Yeah. And then, sorry, just so you can reiterate your second question, is that really, are you asking, is like, what's an encouraging word that I have for people, maybe high schoolers or parents of those people that are struggling to really think that their purpose is like a job.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, honestly,
yeah.
because and even as I go around and speak for Dare to Dream, like this is what I mean. You're speaking to them through the lens of like, yeah, you're going to graduate high school, and like what is your plan to make yourself money? And it's not. They have a hard time seeing a bigger vision for their life, right? And and even when you take out the faith component, because a lot of the work I do is in public schools, non-Christian private schools, so it's kind of everybody. But there's just this underlying like truth that's not true that you know, that's the next logical step is what are you doing to set up your life to make a difference for your own self, and the whole bigger plan, God's purpose, like how we're called to make a difference and impact the world and the kingdom is not even in that conversation. So I'm interested to find out what you think about it, because like you're walking in your purpose, it's connected to your profession, it has to do with impacting generations, so it's all kind of intertwined like my purpose is. And I just like I know you have sort of a unique take on it, so like lay it down, girl.
So moms, you may hate me, but I'm going to tell you the truth. And that's what we're called, right? Is to be bearers of the truth. So my truth for you today is, your child does not have to go to college. And I think that that's sometimes a very hard thing for some people to realize, but we have become, especially obviously in my generation and even the ones coming up, like we have this concept, like you have to go to school to be successful, to do something that matters so that you can make money to live your life. And that's, I think, one of the biggest, really, like we do ourselves a disservice, we do our kids a disservice if we allow them to really sit under that. Because here's the truth. I went to college, one, because I was like, cool, I'm smart, I get the grades, but two, because I felt the pressure and expectation that it needed to be done. In school, there's programs that are for like college prep, like let's get you there. And not that those things are bad. I think that there are people who, in order to fulfill what God has for their life, they need those things, right? So I don't want a doctor that I'm going to go see that's like, yeah, I've never been to school, but I'm going to give you a shot or something. Like that's just not
I'm really passionate about surgery.
I'm really passionate about it. Like that just doesn't work for me. Sorry, you know? So like I want people to, you know, if you really believe that like God has called you to a specific thing, like yes, some of you need to go to school. But there's a huge aspect of people that there's dreams and things that they want to pursue that they don't need to go to college for. And the secondary thing that I would say is a truth is, and something that I've had to learn truthfully the hard way, because coming, you know, kind of young guns ablazing, I've always been somebody that's very intentional about going after dreams, going after what I feel passionate about. And so I'm just like, let's just go put all my eggs, let's do this, right? Which is not bad. But because of that, I found the truth that sometimes what you're passionate at the beginning, at least at my age, I'm only 22, right? So it might change. I don't know, you know, but from what I know is your purpose sometimes and what you're passionate about won't always equal at the beginning what's making you money. And sometimes you have to be willing to put in the hard work to do what you're passionate about and then to do what's bringing you income, till one day what you're passionate about and then what produces income can become the same thing. So I found myself as a young adult really in that season of believing and trusting that, one, God is going to help me fulfill my passions and fulfill, you know, what his purpose is for me, while also providing opportunities for me to make income so I'm not chasing a dream without the resources to do so. How can I do what I'm passionate about if I don't have the resources? So I would say that as well. And I think I guess advice to parents, to mentors, to whoever that's working that through, like ask them what they love, because I think sometimes kids think what was going to make them money, or they think like what society wants them to think. And I think my encouragement is like, well, what are you passionate about? Like, what do you love? Like ask them what they love. And then from what they love, be like, cool. So what are, you know, some people, okay, here's for example, I have, you know, a few friends are like, hey, I want to be an actor, and that's great, but there needs to be things that you're making money with now, and then a game plan, a goal, right? A step-by-step of how you're also going to be pursuing this thing that you love in a different aspect, and help them set goals, help them set tangible things that they can be doing to start achieving and going after the things that they want to do now. If they want to write a book, start them simple and be like, hey, write a page a day of something you love, or journal. Like, help them operate in what they want to do. If they want to try and be an NBA basketball player, like, who knows if that will happen, but are you equipping them and empowering them to start operating in what they're believing they're called and made to do? If you're not, then I think we're doing a disservice to our kids. Like, if I have a kid saying, hey, Bray, I want to be a worship leader, but I don't give them an opportunity to start working with us to sing or develop in their areas, I'm not helping them. I'm actually saying, hey, that's a really cool thought and idea that you believe God's given you, but I'm going to shut it down because it's not important. Like, it's empowering and saying, hey, if you believe that's what God has for you, how can I assist you? How can I partner with you to, one, still give you the truth, which is, let's get you something that's going to help you make money and do what you need to do, but also the secondary truth, which is, cool, let's help you do what God has created you to do.
For sure.
Yeah.
I love all these questions too. And like, even as you're talking about goal setting and like sitting with your kids and going, okay, I need to kind of die to the fact that like, I want them on this college track, or see like certain things in their future that God doesn't necessarily have. And again, not that college is bad, like as a product of college, and then 10 years later, starting a business with no experience and watching the Lord intersect passion with ministry and vocation. Like in my own life, I can attest to that in a totally different but related way. And what it makes me think of, and it's the perfect transition to talking about fear and what kids can do about it, because you have a lot of kids sitting going, okay, I feel like this is inside me to do. I feel like I have a passion for art or for music or for, you know, going overseas and feeding the hungry or whatever it may be. But you've got these barriers in their way that have to do with fear. I have no idea what to do. I'm super ignorant because I have a little bit of life experience. I have no idea what the steps are. This is why the importance of like being the adults in their lives to go, okay, let's get you a game plan. Let's start helping you ask some of these deeper dive questions to go, yes, like you're experiencing fear because you're not sure. But what we know about life and our life experience, the way God has showed up, like there is a pathway that we're called as adults to walk alongside them, almost like the path is underneath the surface or under the snow or under the dirt. And we're like called to help them find the start of that path. And then
because you don't want to make the calls for them, right?
No, or like carve the path that's like not the one that God if God predestined everything, right? God handled all the twists and the turns and everything. It's about being more on a treasure hunt, not like digging a ditch and going, we're going to pave this road in a totally different way. So my next question has to do with like, so yes, you've got, we've got kids at home who are of all different ages and backgrounds and experiences, right? And they're looking at themselves and they're trying to understand themselves for the first time, going, okay, I have these passions inside me. I feel like God's calling me or tugging me in these ways, or my heart's breaking for something, like, but I have fear around how to take steps, how to do what I need to do to get there. And so the conversation switches now to bravery, because your book is about coming alongside kids and helping to equip them to deal with the fear that they have, that they are bound to experience, because fear is an emotion. So will you talk a little bit about why you felt called to write that book and what you feel like the book does in terms of helping kids go, yes, I am afraid, but I do have tools. I do have power over this fear, and what they can do to like practically get themselves past it.
I love that. Yeah. So, I think the topic of fear actually is just a huge passion of mine. And it's something that I am passionate about because it's something that I have to choose daily, as we all do, to overcome. And I truly believe, though, and why my heart is why it's a kid's book, why it's not yet, a book for women or whatever, is because I really believe that with children, we get the opportunity to set some of the key foundations that are really going to shift and transform their world. And if we can set those foundations at an early age, we really equip and empower them to be really just like these top-notch people, or especially like these spiritual juggernauts that have this concept of going to God first. And I know that if I was at a young age of going to God first, like I see kids within our children's ministry that are prayer warriors at the age of 6 or 8 because they've understood and grown up in the house to know to go to God first. And really why I chose fear as well, not only because I'm passionate about it, but secondary because there are no resources, and I truly believe this, that show kids how to actually deal with it. There's fears that are like, go to mom, go to dad. And that's not bad. I want, like, your child, I would encourage, and even in my book, like this whole part of synopsis is to read the book with your kids so that they can be, really believe in the connection they have with you and intimacy with you in order to be able to have those conversations so that you can build your relationship with them. Like, that's key. That's so important, right? I want the kids that are reading to be like, hey mom, this is actually a fear that I'm dealing with. Can you work through this with me? Right. But a part Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah. So I was going to say a part of that though is, you know, there are no resources. And so I really felt that God put a call on my heart to give a resource that's not only, hey, here's a solution, but really the true solution, which is to bring God into the mix. So the way that I'm able to, in that book, really help kids process through that is by two key ways, which is one is to, when they think of a fear, to think of a Bible story where God has already performed, done something, or showed up, right? Because if I'm facing a fear of rejection, example, I can remember that in the Bible, there is a story or a moment where God sends his son to die on the cross for me because I am chosen. And if I can remember that I'm chosen, well, then I'm not fearing rejection because I know that the one who actually matters has chosen me, right? Or if I'm fearing bullying, I can remember the story of David beating Goliath and how God empowered, right, and worked with and gave David courage, gave David his truth in order to defeat Goliath, right? So there's these stories that are used to combat fears. And then the secondary is things about God's character. If I know who God is and I know how much he loves me, oh my gosh, how that will transform the things that I'm facing, how it will help, encourage me, how it will help give me that bravery and courage. If I know that, because there's literally there's so many scriptures that just I
download all the things about who God is. I know.
Yeah, but all that to say, there's a part, even with the whole, David defeating Goliath, the whole I'm afraid of bullying or afraid of whatever. There is a scripture that says God is with me like a mighty warrior. If I know God's character, that is going to encourage me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I may feel weak. I may feel like I can't win this. But if I know who my God is, and if I know how much he loves me and how much he's for me, well, then I can take on the world. And so those are the two key things that the book has really done. And what I felt God called me to do was, one, give kids stories. Because, right, a lot of people are like, well, how's your book practical? Okay, there's a practical step to it. If I can remember when something I'm facing, if I can remember something through that, oh, hey, I'm actually afraid to do this, but I can remember to be brave because God is the light. Or, if I can remember those things, even in the back of my mind or whatever's happened, that's what the book's for. It's to help kids, right? And then as well as a secondary to that, the book where the phrase "be gone fear" comes from is it's also to establish authority. So not only are we equipping kids with this humbo jumbo, but it's also equipping them with, right, this authority to where they understand they have the power with God to say no to fear. And I think that that's a key aspect. So if fear comes my way, I can say, you know what? Be gone fear because my God says this. So it's equipping with word and authority. So be gone fear because my God says that he defeated the darkness, right? So you're now having a full on, really just come around of all these different things that kids are learning through that book. And what I believe are huge game changers, not only for kids, but in every aspect of life. I've learned this obviously as a young adult, but things that I know can transform, a middle schooler, can transform a high schooler, and even us all as adults. If we can understand that we have the authority over fear because of what God did for us and what he sent his son to do for us, which is to defeat darkness, to defeat those things, then I can, even when stuff is hard, even when I'm struggling through it, I can remember, you know what? Be gone, fear. You have no place here. You have no right. You have no authority because I know who my God is. I know who he says I am, and I know what he has called me to. But yeah. I'm round.
No, I love that too because and when you talk about it, fear, I know the number one thing that parents would tell me, of young kids when I would teach and kindergarten, first, second grade, was some of these concepts and some of these emotions are abstract. They're really hard for kids to understand. But what you're talking about is simply giving them a framework for, okay, when I experience this emotion, I identify it as fear. Yeah. And then the first thing I do is try to think about a Bible story to help me remember what God did and how God showed up. And the second thing I do, you're walking them through this, almost a 3-step process. And the second step would be okay, here I am going, okay, if I can remind myself of God's character, one verse, one something that will help me remember and remind myself in this moment, this is who God is. And then the third thing, which is just being able to say one thing out of your mouth or in a prayer or to be able to take authority and dominion over that fear because it is an emotion that comes from darkness. It does not come from God. And it's the opposite of love, right? So I love the idea of when you think about these emotions and like, I'm not sure how to, walk alongside my kids and help them manage their emotions well.
Yeah. And it's not telling them either that like, it's not real. Cause I think sometimes what we do, we can really get in our heads about like, it's just an emotion or it's just this, right? But
or you're fine. You're fine. That's the other thing. Like, oh, it's fine. You know what I mean? Where it's like, no, like it's a legitimate emotion that a kid needs tools to be able to move past. And I love that it just makes it really simple. But you end with like this idea of this, I'm not going to be victimized by the thing I'm experiencing because I have power. I have strength in Jesus. If I remember who God is and what he's done for me, like I can squash this feeling.
Correct. Yeah.
And the squashing is the processing of it and the ability to move past it, which is ultimately what we're trying to tell kids to do. So I love it because a lot of times, you want your kids to be brave, or you say like, this is a moment where you need bravery. And it's like, cool. Like, how do I get that? You know what I mean? Mom. And kids are looking at you like, awesome. Yeah, I would love to have that right now. And then here you are going, no, there are actually 3 really easy steps that you can do. So I'm going to put these up on our podcast site just to like give people like those 3 takeaways because I feel like it's such a good way to wrap up our time to be like, yes, this exists, but like here are some 3 super practical tools that you can use. And then we'll link the book there also. Bree, I could literally talk to you forever. And I know we'll keep in touch because I just love you and your heart and everything that you have going on. We do have to wrap up though, which makes me so sad. But when we do at the end of each episode with something real quick. It's called The Scoop. It's 3 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Oh my gosh. Rapid fire. Okay. So how long do I have to answer them?
Well, by rapid fire, I mean like I'll ask them, also talk a lot during the questions so you can, think of an answer.
Perfect. Okay. Do it.
Awesome.
Let's have it.
I should stop calling them rapid fire. Like it's 3 rapid, like don't be nervous, but you have to answer quickly. Like let's calm down.
I'm shaking it in my boots. All right.
End the episode with 3 reasonably asked questions in terms of tempo and time to think about your answer. Okay. Question 1. This podcast is obviously about heroes for girls. When you were a girl, who was your hero?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so like there could be a whole set, like if we're going Christian mode, if we're going
Should we have another podcast for this one? Like Bree's
what
heroes
the world?
From childhood.
Okay, easily. Like I know we just kind of celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but like I used to think that Rosa Parks was so BA. I was like, oh my gosh, like she stood up for what she believed in. Biblically, I also think that pairs with Esther, always been somebody that I've really loved in the Bible. And then growing up, I think sometimes our parents are really our heroes. So shout out to Mom. That was, how she's handled a lot of things that she does in her world is very inspirational to me. So
absolutely. That was only 3, but if you have more, we can talk offline.
Perfect.
We'll just put them in the notes for everybody. This is Bree's list of 100 heroes that she had. It's good. You need heroes.
And hold on the tip.
There's more. There's more.
Is my hero.
Yeah, he is. Mine too. Okay. Second question. What is a piece of advice you've received that has impacted your life in a powerful way?
A piece of advice I received. Oh my gosh. My life is consumed with people that are forever encourage me, which I would say, there you go. Maybe not the most impactful, but something that has transformed my life is to have people that are speaking into your world and believing in you. And I think without that, there's truthfully, like I wouldn't even be alive today if I didn't have people that were willing to encourage me through my seasons of depression or anxiety or whatever that I've walked through. Like I said, in part of my story, even going through that season of being away from God, like if I didn't have people that were believing in me and investing in me. So get surrounded with people that are, for you, that are going to encourage you in every season, and not only just encourage you, but like be willing to pull you up out of your stuff, being willing to push you forward when you need it, and being willing to tell you the truth, because any good relationship operates in truth, which is say like, hey, that's going on. Let's actually cut that out or allow God to deal with that, because you can't be who all of you're called to be until you allow God to step into that realm of your life. So I would say the people surrounding you, that something is completely transformed my life more than anything of the words that they've said, but more so that they've been a part of my world and a part of my process, even when I felt like no one should be.
Oh, it's so good. That's why like hope and prayer for everybody listening too, like that you do have even one person speaking truth into your life and coming alongside you. Like we need community, we need relationships, we're built for them. It's so good. Yeah. Okay, Bree, last question. If you could have a secret superpower, what would it be? Well, honestly, only one though. You can't have more than one. It's really hard.
I've always wanted to like fly, but like I feel like that would get kind of old, So
I just flew to Tahiti now.
Maybe transporting. That's a high, okay, transporting or like being invisible. Transporting because like no traffic, no nothing. Like you just go where you need to go, right? Like I could visit 100,000 coffee shops in one day and it'd be perfect. And I think that's what I would really like. Transporting.
Not have that much
There
coffee responsibly. So I like that. That's really good. Okay, Bree, where is the easiest place, best place for everybody to find you online, to connect with you, find out more about you and what you're doing, your ministry, all the things you have going on?
Yeah, so I recently just launched a website, which is www.breannarobinson.com. So you can obviously hopefully post that for them. You can find the resource on there, which will also link to Amazon, Barnes & Noble for that book. And then you can always obviously follow me on Instagram, Bree Robinson _. And then as well as the blog is at The Purpose Within. So yeah, those are kind of all the jazz you can find me at, follow along my journey. And yeah, I'm excited to connect with you guys.
Awesome. We are so excited that you've been here, and I just personally love you. So thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
And you are such a blessing, girlfriend. It's been great.
Yes. Love you. And, thank you to everybody. Hopefully this encouraged and inspired you and, you know, the women that you're raising up into who they will be. So it's going to be awesome.
I know it will. Thanks so much, girl.
Bye.
Woohoo!